Welcome to a very special Weir Reading virtual story time for Hanukkah. Today we will be reading Mrs. Greenberg's Messy Hanukkah by Glaser, illustrated by Nancy Coate, and making a paper plate menorah. Enjoy the story. Mrs. Greenberg's Messy Hanukkah by Glaser, illustrated by Nancy Coate. Pause the recording here for a potato latke recipe. Please, can we make potato latkes today? Rachel sat at the kitchen table, swinging her legs. And let's invite Mrs. Greenberg for dinner. Enough with the latkes, Mama threw her hands in the air. I told you already. We'll make them next week when the relatives come. That's when we'll invite Mrs. Greenberg. But tonight won't even feel like the first night of Hanukkah. Rachel took the menorah from the cupboard and pushed the first 2 candles in. No latkes, no company. We'll light the candles, Mama kissed her on the nose. It'll be Hanukkah. Don't worry. But right now, Papa and I have lots of errands, so let's get your coat on. Rachel set the menorah on the windowsill. It was such a cold, gray day out there, just the kind that begged you to make the house all warm and good smelling. That gave her an idea. Can I stay next door with Mrs. Greenberg? All afternoon, Mama shook her head. Please, said Rachel. She's not so used to little monkeys. Papa gave Rachel a playful poke. But it's almost Hanukkah, and she's all alone, Rachel pointed out. She could use a little company. I didn't think of that. Well, I suppose, Mama looked at Papa. If it won't be any trouble. I'm never any trouble. Rachel pushed on her coat and raced to the door, braids flying. Wait, Mama cried after her. I'll just telephone her, just to make sure. But Rachel was already skipping down the path. Mrs. Greenberg's house was all clean and sparkly, like it was just waiting for company. Rachel's house always looked like it was still in bed with its hair sticking up, and Mrs. Greenberg was always glad to see her. Come in, don't be a stranger, said Mrs. Greenberg. I told your dear Mama. Of course you can stay. It's much too empty around here, especially for Hanukkah. Rachel stepped inside. That's just what I told her. She peeled off her coat. Can we make latkes? Oh my, said Mrs. Greenberg. I haven't made latkes in years. But latkes make it feel like Hanukkah, Rachel explained. It's some messy job, said Mrs. Greenberg. All that grating and frying. But Mama and Papa would be so surprised. Rachel jumped in the air. I didn't think of that. I do have plenty of potatoes. Wonderful, Rachel exclaimed. She skipped into the kitchen where everything had its very own place, and it all sparkled, even the floor. Mrs. Greenberg handed her an apron, and they both got right to work grating potatoes. Rachel tried to keep her gratings in a nice little hill like Mrs. Greenberg's, but somehow her little hill slid right off the table. Oops, said Rachel. Oi, said Mrs. Greenberg. What a mushy mess. Rachel grabbed the mop, but the more she mopped, the worse it got. That's okay, Mrs. Greenberg took the mop. I'll finish later. Don't you worry. After all, what's a little grated potato between friends? Next, it was time for the egg. Rachel tried to crack it into the bowl just like Mama always did, but somehow it popped right out of her hands. Oops, said Rachel. Oi, said Mrs. Greenberg. What a slippery mess. Rachel grabbed the mop, but the more she mopped, the worse it got. That's fine. I'll finish later, said Mrs. Greenberg. She stepped all over the yellow, shiny streaks. Don't you worry. After all, what's a little egg between friends? She gave a sigh. Soon we'll have Hanukkah latkes, Rachel reminded her. Mrs. Greenberg stirred everything in a big bowl. Rachel lugged over a bag of flour. Don't we need this? But somehow the bag ripped. Oops, said Rachel. Oi, said Mrs. Greenberg. What a slippery mess. Rachel grabbed the mop, but the more she mopped, the worse it got. That's fine. I'll finish later, said Mrs. Greenberg as she stepped all over the shiny yellow streaks. Don't you worry. After all, what's a little egg between friends? She gave a sigh. Soon it'll feel like Hanukkah, Rachel reminded her, and she sure hoped it would. At last it was time to fry the latkes. Mrs. Greenberg checked the clock. Your mama and papa will be here any minute. Quick, Rachel, drizzle a little oil onto the pan. Mama uses lots of oil, said Rachel, for the miracle when all the oil lasts 8 days. But somehow the oil came spurting out faster than Rachel had expected. Much faster. Oops! What a sloppy mess. Rachel reached for the mop. Don't even bother. Mrs. Greenberg sank into a chair in the living room. Just let me rest a few minutes. Anyway, what's a little oil after all this? She flung her arm at the kitchen. Rachel waited for the part about friends, but not a word. And nothing about don't you worry either. Uh-oh, the kitchen was such a mess, like it might faint if it looked at itself in the mirror. What would Mama and Papa say? Just then, the back door opened. Anybody home? Said Papa. Mama stepped in the kitchen. Oh, no! Surprise! Squeaked Rachel, trying to smile. We're making latkes? Mama and Papa did look surprised, but not at the way Rachel had hoped. Not at all. Papa pointed at the floor. What's all this? Mama frowned. Rachel, look what you've done! Rachel's chin trembled. I wanted to make it feel like Hanukkah, but I made a terrible mess. A tear slid down her nose. Mrs. Greenberg hurried over. Oh, Kachkala, you dear little duck. She rubbed the tear away with her thumb. Actually, it's not a terrible mess. It's a wonderful mess. My house hasn't felt this lived in years. Really? Rachel brightened up. Well, I can make it feel lived in any time you want. Mrs. Greenberg laughed out loud. Oh, darling, I'm sure you can. Rachel grabbed the mop. Now let's really clean up. Don't be silly. I'll do it later, said Mrs. Greenberg. Do me a favor, said Papa. Sit down and relax. That's right, said Rachel. We want to do it. Mama tied on an apron and fried up the latkes crispy and hot while Rachel and Papa cleaned up. Now the house was all sparkly, warm, and good smelling. Mrs. Greenberg lit the candles and said the blessings. Finally, everything was just how Rachel had imagined. Thank you, Mrs. Greenberg, she beamed. Don't thank me, thank you, said Mrs. Greenberg grandly as she set the latkes on the table. I've got latkes and company. You sure do. Rachel hugged Mrs. Greenberg around her nice soft middle and gave a happy sigh. Oh, now this feels like Hanukkah. The end. Okay, so to make our paper plate menorah, what I did was I made this little template. These candles I got from Google Images. This was the bottom of a Google Images menorah that I cut off. So you can cut all that out. Of course, I already did that. And then you'll need a paper plate. I already did that. You just want to fold it in half and then cut it. You're only going to use half the plate. Of course, in order to cut it, you need scissors. And here's what I did. I already cut that. And the little candles will go up. There's 8 candles that are regular sized and 1 large one because there are 8 nights of Hanukkah, and then the large one goes in the middle, and that's what you light the other candles with. So we'll get that all together. To attach it all, we're going to use just a glue stick. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to use this white crayon. It's just a regular crayon, white, and when we draw symbols and stuff on it, I'm going to do it that way. When we draw symbols and stuff on it, it will show up when we use watercolors. So you'll also need a paintbrush. And I made these watercolors. This is actually, believe it or not, yellow. It looks orange. Or I'm sorry. Which one's which? Okay. One of them's yellow, one of them's orange. And then we have blue. And then I have an empty cup of water, just plain clear water, to rinse my brush in. The way I made these, I just dumped, these little party cups are cool because they have all these lines. I filled it up to the first line with water and then just dumped as much food coloring in until I got the color I wanted. I was gonna do this here. That's obviously yellow. And then we would rinse it with a clear, and then, so we know that's the orange. I'm gonna use that for the flames, and the blue is gonna be for the candles. So the yellow will be for the basic menorah, and we'll go from there. And you'll see once we draw on it with the wax will keep it from sticking to the paper, so those will show up hopefully white. So the first thing we're going to do is glue everything together, and I'll do that quickly for you. Okay, so this is what it looks like. And there's the bottom and the top. You can see the candles aren't on perfectly, but they never are when I do them. I do try, but I'm not good at getting things straight. Okay, the next thing we're gonna do is go ahead and draw any designs we want. Like I said, I wanna put a Star of David on this here. The Star of David is also known as the Jewish star. It's just two triangles, it's hard to see, but it's one that way and one that way. I don't know if you can see it on there or not. I'll hold it real close. You really can't see it, but you'll see it once it shows up. And then I wanted to take and draw some designs on here. Just fun. Just little loopy things and stuff. And I can already see that I've lost one of my candles. You might want to wait till they're all dry. I thought I'd be okay. So I'm just gonna go flip that over and stick that guy back on. Part of any craft is making mistakes because you learn from them, which is cool. All right, so there's that, and I just put some lines and stuff. Doesn't have to be anything too elaborate. I'm just doing it for fun. And I did want to put stripes on my candles, just because why not? Typical Jewish colors are blue and white. So that's kind of why I wanted to leave a little white on the candles when I paint them blue. So there's that. Sorry. I always think things are going to take less time than they actually take me. You should just see me cutting them all out and everything. But that's okay. Live and learn. And because we're going from light to dark here, I'm going to go ahead and use the yellow first. And these are watercolors, so they'll wipe right off. I'm not really worried about them getting on my table here. So I'm just painting. You can see the relief there. And then I'm gonna paint up here, get the actual part that holds the candles of the menorah. I know a lot of times I'd be like, oh yeah, paint it first and then put it together, but I thought this was fun. Look, okay, now you can see the Star of David. Or the Jewish star, whichever you want to see. See it? It's really very symmetrical. I like that. Well, maybe mine's not symmetrical. It's meant to be symmetrical. The only thing is I don't want it to run up and get my candles, because I want the candles to be blue, not green. And we know that if yellow and blue mix together, we get green. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that on. It's pooling a little bit down there. You can get a paper towel and dab it. If you do make a mistake, it's no big deal. This is just something for fun. There are 8 nights in Hanukkah. The first day begins after sunset on the first day. So I'm not going to talk about the religious aspects because this is a secular story time, but if you want to learn more about it, I'm sure you can go to the library and get plenty of books. And I am going to use a little paper towel to kind of dab, just so it doesn't run. And actually dabbing is kind of good because it makes it flatten out because it's wet. Okay, so we got that part. I am going to do the flames next, little orange flames. And we'll dab those off too. So that's that. Doing this from home today, so hopefully we won't have any unexpected guests pop in. See my cats walking around, but hopefully my husband and kids just stayed at their place for tonight. All right, and again, I'm trying not to mix the colors too much. Okay, you can see some of the stripes worked out better than others. This is a flat brush. My daughter does a lot of painting. She doesn't do watercolors. She's more into acrylic. But I figure with this kind of watercolor painting, you're not really needing to, you know, this is no Monet here, is what I'm trying to say. So you can see my stripes coming up. That's called relief. And the reason that works is because the wax of the crayon keeps the paint from sticking to the paper. I use cardstock on the candles and paper plate, which is about the same material as cardstock. So that's about it. Kind of get that off. I do want to get a little bit more yellow down there, but I think it turned out pretty cute. So that's our menorah for Hanukkah, which will go on for the next 8 days. And one thing you could do if you wanted to was you could not paint those and color them one at a time or paint them one at a time. You can also use crayons or markers on this. I just really like the idea of the watercolors. So that's it. Happy Hanukkah, everyone.